October 2025. On Mars, Perseverance continued its quiet work. A photo was sent back to Earth. In it, a faint streak of light, barely visible, appearing exactly where the predicted orbit of 3I Atlas was supposed to pass. An amateur astronomer named Simeon Schmaus noticed it. He stacked the frames together, and the light became clearer. It wasn't a star, and it wasn't image noise. It moved softly, steadily, with purpose. He knew, whatever it was exactly where it was meant to be. A few hours later, NASA went silent. No new statements, no follow-up images. Every official channel stopped updating. No one explained why. That same day, 15,000 NASA employees received notice of a temporary furlough. The official reason: federal government shutdown. The timing was too precise, too neat to feel like coincidence. Because if this was just another comet, there was no reason for silence. And if it wasn't, then the silence was far more frightening. The orbiters circling Mars, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Mars Express, ExoMars, were all in perfect position to capture it. Yet not a single image was released, no footnotes, no explanations. Online, that silence became a storm. People debated, reconstructed trajectories, zoomed in on every pixel, and asked the same question again and again. Why aren't they saying anything? Some believed NASA had nothing to say. Others believed the opposite, that they had too much to say. An object from beyond the solar system, the world's largest space agency. A faint signal, cut off mid-transmission. That was all it took for humanity's imagination to ignite. October 3rd, 2025. No explosions, no spectacle, just a forgotten glimmer in the data. But sometimes, it is the smallest trace that opens the largest door. If the universe sends a signal and humanity chooses not to listen, then who is truly silent? The universe, or us? After the first image appeared, the scientific world waited for the rest of the story. Just a few more days, they thought, as 3I Atlas drew closer to its predicted path. The satellites around Mars would send back clear images, and humanity would finally see a visitor from beyond the solar system with its own eyes. But that never happened. Every data channel remained active. The deep space network pulsed steadily, heartbeat-like across the void. Then one day, the pulse stopped, not from technical failure, but as if someone had quietly pulled the plug. From the wall of the universe, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the sharpest eye around Mars, was in perfect position to observe. Its high-rise camera could resolve objects mere tens of centimeters across. If 3I Atlas was truly there, it had to have crossed human sight. And yet, no images were released, no reports, no commentary. The European Space Agency stayed silent too. Mars Express, ExoMars, both built to detect even faint chemical changes in the Martian atmosphere, to capture glimmers, tiny oscillations of matter in space. But instead of publishing, they issued a single sterile notice: observation in progress. Results to be released after processing. 42 words. 42 words for an event unlike anything in the history of science. When data crosses the border between science and politics, it ceases to be data. It becomes a decision, and in that moment, humanity chose silence. On Earth, independent astronomers tried again, pointing their own instruments toward Mars. Some spectrometers picked up faint infrared anomalies, signals resembling CO2 reflection or ionized material, but no one dared to claim anything. No cross-verification, no official records, just a string of numbers drifting in the dark. Online, silence turned into storm. Orbit maps were shared, arguments erupted, every person carrying a private theory. Some said it was a comet, others swore it was technology, and in all the noise, no one heard the voice of science anymore. Because when data stops, imagination begins. NASA's silence became the epicenter. Some said they were just following protocol. Others believed they had seen something the world wasn't ready for. Inside the control centers, the spectrometers and antennas still worked flawlessly. Every bit of transmission was archived, locked away, unseen, unshared. An anonymous engineer left a message on a private research forum. The data hasn't disappeared. It's just gone somewhere the public can't reach. Outside, tension thickened. Journalists asked. NASA didn't answer. ESA stayed quiet, and the world kept guessing, because humanity cannot bear the vacuum of not knowing. That night, across the planet, people who loved the sky still looked up. They searched the constellation Corona Borealis, the crown of the north, where Three-Eye Atlas once passed. Some said they saw a faint flicker, a heartbeat of distant light, as if something far away was trying to speak. No one could be sure what was real, but everyone felt something had changed. Not in the cosmos, but in the way we listen to it. Because silence, when it lasts long enough, can become its own kind of language. And perhaps, that night, NASA wasn't silent out of fear. Perhaps they, too, were listening to see if that faint light was trying to say something to humankind. In the modern world, data is the heartbeat of science. When a telescope opens its eye, when a rover sends a signal home, everything is recorded, translated into numbers, and reborn as knowledge. But in those first days of October, that heartbeat stopped, not from a malfunction, but as if an invisible hand had touched the switch. No new signals, no fresh updates. The systems were still alive, but everything felt unnaturally still. They called it the data silence, a rare condition where technology remains awake, but knowledge is restrained. In Pasadena, in Darmstadt, in Tokyo, the control rooms stayed lit through the night. People kept working, but their eyes no longer looked outward. They stared at the monitors and saw the gaps between lines of code, gaps that seemed to breathe. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood something was happening. A decision had been made somewhere very high, and science, vast as it was, could not escape the limits of the human world. The international scientific community tried to keep the dialogue alive. Emails were exchanged, virtual meetings held, but every answer sounded the same. Nothing to release yet. A reply so brief it chilled the listener. Science journals slowly shifted topics. News channels stopped mentioning Three-Eye Atlas. Only a few faint lines remained on astronomy forums, where stargazers still whispered about an object the world seemed intent on forgetting. But silence cannot hide everything. Small radio stations began catching faint signals, a weak electric pulse, repeating over long intervals. coming from near Mars's orbit. Not strong, not clear, but enough to make the listener feel as if something out there was trying to speak. No one dared call it artificial. No one wrote the words extraterrestrial intelligence. But within the data streams, a rhythm emerged, steady, precise, patient, like a heartbeat. Astronomers called it anomaly noise, its soul. Others simply named it the pulse, a faint rhythm. And then, like everything else in this story, it vanished. No more data. No new images. No papers published. The silence stretched so long, it became the background music of science itself. And when an event lingers in silence long enough, people begin to accept it as normal. NASA stopped speaking. ESA stayed quiet. The observatories stopped asking. Only a few kept watching the night sky, waiting for something, anything to return. But 3I Atlas had passed behind the sun, into a region no telescope could reach. And in that moment, the entire data network of humanity, from Earth to Mars, fell utterly still. Not because the connection was lost, but because humanity chose to cut it. We turned off our own signal, as if afraid of the answer it might bring. In space, silence is ordinary, but in the human world, silence is always a sign that something is being hidden. The signal is still out there, floating amid sunlight and plasma haze. Perhaps it's only an ancient block of ice, or perhaps it's something else, a form of language we've never learned to read. And if that's true, then silence is no longer concealment. It's preparation. Preparation for the moment, when humanity must finally face the most difficult question of all. Are we ready to know? When the observatories stayed silent, the internet began to speak. One morning in mid-October, a Twitter account named UFO Mania posted a single image, a blurry frame, allegedly leaked from Martian data. In it, against the rust-red atmosphere, hung a strange object, straight, smooth, faintly luminous, like a metal cylinder suspended in the thin Martian sky. The photo spread within minutes. By reflex of a hyper-connected age, it leapt beyond servers, beyond language, from Reddit to Telegram, from YouTube to Discord. Within one afternoon, millions had seen it. No one knew its true origin. No one could confirm whether it was authentic, fabricated, or leaked. But what captivated people wasn't truth. It was the feeling of truth, the sense that something was happening and someone was hiding it. The image contained no metadata, no coordinates, only a simple title, "The Cylinder Above Mars," a name so plain it felt ominous, a cylindrical object in the Martian sky. Within hours, hundreds of accounts began dissecting it. They enlarged, adjusted contrast, filtered noise, then declared, it could not be a star, nor orbital debris. It had a defined shape, and its shadow did not match any solar angle. A few cited NASA's open-source data, comparing timestamps with known Martian maps, and found a startling coincidence. The coordinates aligned exactly with the predicted path of 3I Atlas, as published months earlier. The community erupted. Some mocked it as digital theater. Others trembled, convinced they saw something too symmetrical, too deliberate, to be random. Meanwhile, NASA remained silent. No denial, no confirmation. The ESA said nothing either, and that silence turned a blurry image into an icon. In its first hours, it was no longer scientific data. It became a social signal, a pulse of collective emotion racing across millions of minds, all staring at the same frame, asking the same question. If it isn't a comet, then what is it? Journalists joined in. European outlets ran headlines. Cylindrical object seen in Martian sky. Television channels built 3D mock-ups to estimate its size and motion. If the object truly hovered near Mars's upper atmosphere, it would have been several hundred meters long. From one photograph, the world began writing its own narrative. And, as always, that story spread faster than light. Among millions talking at once, some believed it marked the dawn of a new era, others, a catastrophic mistake. But everyone agreed on one thing. NASA's silence was no longer an absence. It was a message. A message unspoken, delivered by not speaking at all. When science stops talking, people start to hear something else. The echo of belief and the fear that hides beneath the surface of knowledge. Within days, that image became the center of the internet. Thousands analyzed it, traced its source, and wondered why NASA remained silent. Amateur astronomers began posting photos from their own telescope. Some showed faint, unusual light near Mars, a weak glow, but with a definite trajectory. No one could say what it was, but everyone felt that something was moving out there, real and impossibly quiet. In space, there is no sound. Yet if you listen closely, you can still feel the pulse of information. Every tweet, every comment, like tiny electric signals connecting Earth to the sky. If you're still listening, take a second to like this video. Let the algorithm know you're awake and that you want to keep traveling with me through this widening universe. The news stream surged on. From New York to Tokyo, from small amateur forums to scientific journals, everyone was talking about the Martian cylinder. Headlines grew heavier. What is NASA hiding in this image? 3I Atlas, the object that shouldn't exist. Have we just seen alien technology? The wave spread so fast that truth and fear blurred together. One viral video showed the cylinder rotating, but it was just a simulation. Another claimed it emitted strange light, but offered no proof. Information became a kind of radiation, spreading, heating, burning away the space between data and imagination. In that world, truth had never felt so faint. The more people spoke, the heavier NASA's silence became, a pause inside the noise, a place where people began hearing their own thoughts. A few young scientists tried to stay rational. They wrote, "It's just a reflection in Martian dust. This is for their nows. There's for their nows." But no one shared their posts. Because humans don't love simple answers. We crave mystery more than truth. And when a mystery grows strong enough, it becomes belief. At night, the forums stayed lit. The sleepless kept re-examining the same photo, looking for something others had missed. Some said the cylinder pulsed with rhythmic light. Others claimed it was watching Mars itself. No evidence. Yet their words sounded like testimony. In the endless current of the internet, information never truly dies. It only changes form, from data to emotion to myth. And through it all, that object remained out there, drifting past the Martian sky, between two worlds, one ruled by science, the other by the imagination of humankind. We still don't know what it is, but sometimes it's the not knowing that keeps us looking up. If you're listening, like this video and subscribe to keep traveling with me. Beneath a sky full of signals, every small click you make is a quiet greeting to the universe. After the storm of rumors, the scientific world finally spoke, not through headlines, but through data. An independent team called 3I Atlas Anomaly released the first orbital report on 3I Atlas. They compared patterns of reflected light and found something strange. The object emitted no dust, no plasma tail, yet showed an unusually high albedo, more like metal than rock or ice. Spectral analysis revealed a reversal in light polarization, a phenomenon almost never seen. That meant its surface was flat and uniform, not crystalline or naturally fractured. The findings drew attention across the astronomical community. Some suggested it might be a dead comet, its volatile gases long gone, leaving only a dense reflective core. But that didn't explain why its orbit remained so stable. Astrophysicist Stephen Burns was the first to speak on television. He spoke slowly, precisely, and left behind one sentence that froze everyone in silence. This object isn't just flying. It seems to know where it is. No one knew exactly what he meant, but the clip spread like wildfire. The line became the quote of the week, half science, half metaphor, and entirely unsettling. After that interview, observatories scrambled to verify the data. A team in Chile reported slow, rhythmic infrared oscillations. No signs of life, but clearly a source of energy. NASA and ESA said nothing. No confirmation, no denial. Only one restrained line. We don't yet have enough data to conclude. It sounded cautious, but it was also where imagination began. Inside laboratories, it was just numbers, but for the rest of the world, it became something far larger. A question whispered beneath every headline. Could there be an object, not born of nature, but designed with intention? Science offered no answer. It only left behind a faint, lingering feeling that something out there was following a different logic, silent, precise, and far more patient than humanity itself. Her name was Moneypenny, a former science journalist, once part of NASA's Plasma Data Analysis Division. She vanished from the public eye for nearly a decade, until one day, she returned with a single article titled, "The Cylinder Thinks." No charts, no citations, just calm, unhurried prose. Yet something inside it reached deeper than science. She wrote that the infrared data from 3I Atlas revealed a rhythmic oscillation 0.143 Hz, not random, not noise, but repeating steadily, like the heartbeat or dream wave of a sleeping mind. According to her, it wasn't the object emitting a signal, but light reacting to it. A two-way process, as if the light itself was listening back. That line spread across the internet like wildfire. Half the people called it metaphor. Half believed she meant it literally, because in spectroscopy, no natural object reflects light with such a stable conscious rhythm. A few scientists tried to reproduce her data. None could, but none dismissed it either. They simply said, "We can't confirm it." The original dataset was retracted. After that, Moneypenny disappeared again. Her accounts locked, emails dead. Former colleagues said she left the lab abruptly and was never seen afterward. But her words left a trace that couldn't be erased. She suggested that 3I Atlas wasn't transmitting anything. It was reflecting deliberately, a structure that interacted with light, not through energy, but through awareness. She wrote, "If an intelligence is advanced enough, it doesn't need radio waves. It only needs to modulate photons. One beam goes out, another returns, and between them, the universe learns something new about itself." Science never confirmed her theory, but it never disproved it either. Because sometimes, what lies beyond measurement isn't false, just not yet ready to be understood. Moneypenny's story ended not with evidence, but with a feeling that perhaps light doesn't only illuminate the universe, it might also be the way the universe looks back at us. After Moneypenny's story spread, the world seemed to have reached the edge of speculation. Then another name surfaced: Jon Stewart. He wasn't NASA, not academia, a researcher of unidentified aerial phenomena, with a reputation for being half visionary, half mad, and inconveniently right a few times before. In a short interview, Stewart spoke of Three-Eye Atlas in a low, steady voice. He didn't talk about physics. He talked about intention. According to him, the object wasn't merely drifting matter. It behaved like an observer. "It's not that we're watching it," he said. "It's that it's watching us." The phrase spread like fire. For a moment, science and mysticism overlapped. People began speaking of thinking light of intelligence hidden in orbit. Stewart explained, if a civilization wished to observe without being seen, it wouldn't need ships or radio waves, only a simple structure placed precisely in orbit, reflecting light according to a preset code. A cylinder, perhaps. He called it the ritual of light, a form of communication beyond language, spoken only in spectra, a conversation between two minds that do not share time. Supporters insisted he wasn't fantasizing. They noted that Three-Eye Atlas maintained an impeccable trajectory along the ecliptic, as if deliberately positioned to observe three planets: Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. 3 points, 3 reflections, a perfect geometric mirror of light. To physicists, coincidence. To Stewart, an ancient ritual of the cosmos. The story spilled beyond science, into podcasts, late-night forums, quiet voices over static. People began to feel unease, not fear of the object, but of the idea that maybe humanity had been observed for far longer than it realized. NASA stayed silent, ESA too, and now that silence no longer felt like absence, it sounded like confirmation. Stewart ended with a single line: "If it really is observing, perhaps the only thing left for us to do is be still." After that, he vanished. No posts, no appearances, only the echo of that sentence floating through the digital night, a quiet warning for an age drowning in data. And within that silence, people began to understand something unsettling. There are things that, if you stare at them too long, begin to stare back. When all hypotheses had run dry, only silence remained. No new images were released. No reports. No delayed NASA press briefings. Just brief statements. The same refrain over and over. Insufficient data to confirm. But everyone knew this was no longer about data. It was about a decision. The original photo of the Martian cylinder vanished from every platform. Copies lingered, blurred, compressed, as if the universe itself wanted to erase its own reflection. Now the story survived only in the memories of those who had seen it. They described it differently, but all recalled the same feeling, that the object, real or not, had changed the world's understanding of silence. Astronomers kept observing, But no one mentioned 3i Atlas again. Its name slowly faded, replaced by new subjects, new signals, new noise. On paper, it was just another interstellar body, drifting out of the solar system, at a constant velocity, a data point, a dot on a graph. And yet, those who had once seen that image could never forget that strange, still light, soundless, unmoving, but with the unmistakable sense of being seen. Perhaps it was never an object, perhaps only a data glitch, a reflection error, a collective hallucination fed by institutional silence. But perhaps it was something else, a subtle act of observation, sent only to test how humanity would react when confronted with what it could not understand. That question never found an answer, and maybe that's why it endured. In late November, a small observatory in Finland reported a faint light drifting beyond Mars's orbit. Slow, deliberate, almost perfectly linear. No tail, no emission, just a lonely point in the cosmic dark. No one confirmed it was 3i Atlas. No one denied it. The data was archived, then forgotten, like every story that begins in mystery. In the end, what remained was not the object, but the feeling that we had glimpsed something beyond comprehension, then turned away, as if that light were too real to touch. Some say 3i Atlas was a message, others, a frozen stone. Maybe both are true, because sometimes the universe doesn't speak in language. It simply sends us silence and waits to see what we'll fill it with. When the telescopes saw nothing more, humanity turned inward. In the silence of data, a new voice emerged, not from NASA, not from any laboratory, but from a single person, Bertie Jorski. She wasn't a scientist. She was a remote viewer, one of those trained to see across distance using only consciousness, a method once tested by the US military in the 1,980 seconds. In a quiet live stream, Bertie said she had seen inside the object known as 3i Atlas. Her voice was calm, measured, not mystical, not grand. Like someone recounting a dream she never meant to remember. It isn't hollow, she said. Inside there's a core, small, crystalline, a few centimeters long. It glows faintly, and there are markings lines running along its length. Not random, ordered. 1, well, 4. No one interrupted her. For that moment, skepticism gave way to fascination. She continued, "It feels like someone placed it there intentionally long ago. Not a machine, not a life form, more like a thought made physical. Something that wanted to be found." That sentence rippled through the small community still watching 3i Atlas, not because it was proven, but because it arrived when science had gone utterly quiet. Psychologists said Bertie was projecting a collective desire, the need for meaning in a vacuum of information. But others noticed the final detail she mentioned. "I saw a symbol, 3 circles interlocked, with a single point in the center, like a map, but not of space, of awareness." No one knew what that meant, yet the image matched eerily the radio frequency pattern of the WOW signal detected in 1977 from the constellation Sagittarius. Astronomers called it coincidence. Others weren't so sure. 2 events, 50 years apart, both leaving behind a single perfect pulse, and silence that followed. Bertie Jorski said nothing more. Her broadcast ended with one final line. "Maybe they don't speak in radio. Maybe they speak in consciousness. In space, light can travel for billions of years, but in the mind, it takes only a moment." Her story spread quietly, hovering in that strange borderland between science and belief. No one could prove it, but no one could deny that when science stops, human awareness is always the first to continue the journey. When Bertie Jorski spoke again, her words carried the stillness of deep water. She said that what she saw inside 3i Atlas was unlike anything she had ever encountered in her remote viewing sessions. Not rock, not ice, but a substance clear as glass, transparent, yet somehow heavier than sight itself. She described a form that defied human geometry. No edges, no center. Every curve led inward to a point, then unfolded outward again, as if space were folding itself to watch its own reflection. "There's a core," she whispered, "small, crystalline, surrounded by layers of fine material. It glows faintly, like it's breathing, slow, steady, Lingdian Yisesen hertz." Scientists froze at that number. It was the same frequency Moneypenny had noted in her plasma data report. Two people, unknown to each other, reporting the same pulse. Researchers called it coherence, an ordered coincidence, often more unsettling than proof. In Bertie's account, the core was a piece of data made physical, something both object and information. She said it didn't store energy. It stored response. Whatever touched it, light, signal, thought, was reflected back, but altered as if it had learned. To skeptics, it was fantasy. To others, it sounded uncannily like adaptive reflection, the same logic used in machine learning systems on Earth. Learn from feedback, rewrite the pattern. If Bertie was right, then 3i Atlas wasn't an object at all, but a system, a cold intelligence woven into matter, needing no signal, only light to think. Eyes closed, voice barely a breath, she said. "It's observing, not me." The act of observation itself. A strange phrase, yet in quantum physics, not unfamiliar. The observer always changes the observed. If 3i Atlas was built to mirror every act of perception, then every time we looked at it, it was also looking back, in its own way. Science had no instrument subtle enough to test her claim. The signal from 3i Atlas was too faint, beyond the reach of spectroscopy, but the repetition of one frequency, one idea, across two unrelated minds, kept researchers quiet longer than usual. Bertie ended her session with a single line. "Maybe it carries no message. Maybe it is the message." After that, she disappeared. No trace, no denial, no follow-up, and no one dared to dismiss her completely. History had seen too many superstitions, reborn later as physics with better equations. Perhaps 3i Atlas stands precisely at that border, between science and consciousness, matter and thought, light and awareness, where the line dividing observer and object thins to a single reflective film, and both sides stare into the same endless mirror. As Bertie's data began to circulate and the eerie alignment with the 1977 signal spread through the community, the scientific world fractured in its response. Some astronomers stared at the coordinates and shrugged, politely skeptical. They said it could still fit within physics, a coincidence, a noise pattern, a stray echo in the cosmic static. But others went quiet. They didn't rush to explain, because what Bertie described and what the data echoed from nearly half a century ago seemed to carry more than matter. It had rhythm, structure, information that appeared to exist for its own sake. One physicist murmured to a colleague, "It could be a mirage in the data. But if it isn't, we may be looking at a kind of awareness, not biological, but matter that knows how to respond." No one could test that claim. Yet it silenced more people than any formal argument could, because behind it was the question that physics had long avoided: where does consciousness end and the universe begin? In quiet forums and late-night lab chats, the idea took shape that 3I Atlas might not just be seen, but might itself see. Each time a telescope turned its gaze toward it, tiny shifts appeared in the reflected spectrum, small, faint, repeating in a steady rhythm, as though the act of observation itself were being measured. The question surfaced again and again. Could a physical object interact with human awareness, using nothing but light? Was it a phenomenon or a participant? No one had an answer. Only data, only silence, and a widening space in which thought could echo. Within that silence, matter and mind began to overlap. The boundary between experiment and experience blurred. Careful scientists, the kind who distrusted poetry, found themselves writing about perception as if it were a variable. Some whispered, maybe it isn't about contact. Maybe it's about reflection. A dialogue between consciousness and the cosmos, so subtle that it can only be seen when the instruments stop talking. And in that stillness, a new awareness emerged, that some things do not merely exist, they reply. Not with sound, not with radio, but with the quiet rhythm of light and matter, pulsing in unison like the breath of an unseen intelligence. Those who followed the story stopped searching for proof. They listened instead, to the space between signals, to the hush that lingers after data ends, the way one might listen to the universe breathing in. What Birdie described was more than a vision, it was a synchrony. Her impressions lined up, faintly but unmistakably, with measurable data. The 0.143 Hz oscillations, the mirrored light signatures, the coordinates aligning with the 1977. Wow signal, too coherent to be random, too improbable to dismiss. In the language of science, these coincidences are called non-stochastic correlations, patterns that shouldn't exist, yet do. But what mattered more wasn't the data itself. It was the bridge it seemed to form, between an object beyond the solar system and the awareness of those observing it, between measurement and experience, between matter and idea. Birdie said, "It isn't the object sending a signal, it's the way it reacts to being observed." That sentence opened a door physics had never quite named: the possibility of latent consciousness in matter. To most, it sounded like mysticism, but to some, it was only advanced physics waiting for vocabulary. Imagine a structure built to modulate its light in cycles, a self-adjusting mirror that learns through reflection. Nothing supernatural, just designed so elegant it feels alive. No one dared to claim certainty, yet everyone could feel the rhythm. In the small silences between datasets, the observers and the observed seemed to overlap, not through radio or code, but through the quiet feedback of light itself. And, as all mysteries do, the moment faded. Birdie left no proof, no closing statement, only an aftertaste that what we were watching was watching us back. That silence which followed wasn't the absence of information, but a new medium of exchange. A space where consciousness brushed against physics, where the universe spoke softly, and human thought finally paused long enough to hear. For a brief time, across labs and living rooms, people sensed the same fragile truth, that the cosmos has never been only matter, but also the breath of awareness woven through it, and that 3I Atlas, faint and patient, was a whisper of that awareness, reminding us that we have never been alone in observation. While humanity's eyes remained fixed on the red sky of Mars, NASA chose silence. No press release, no image, no explanation, only a gap in the data. And in that gap, imagination began to breathe. 15,000 employees were placed on furlough. Officially, it was due to a government shutdown. But for those watching the stars, the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. A foreign object had just passed near Mars, and the one institution capable of watching most clearly had gone dark. Inside the field, scientists exchanged quiet glances, but no one spoke aloud. Spectrometers still hummed, servers still blinked, yet the data never left the archive. Some engineers merely nodded to one another, the kind of nod that says we know, but we cannot say. Online, that silence became a story of its own. On astronomy forums, threads multiplied. What is NASA hiding? Theories grew like constellations. Hardware failure, signal interference, or the possibility that the object was not natural at all. Perseverance continued to beam faint telemetry home, but nothing new was published. Infrared spikes, weak optical streaks, all sealed in internal logs. For a moment, it felt as if the entire solar system had paused mid-breath. A strange unease rippled through the scientific world. An interstellar object, the planet's largest space agency, and a synchronized quiet. People began to sense distance not only between Earth and Mars, but between humanity and the truth. Amateurs tried to fill the void, stacking pixels, reconstructing orbits, but each attempt crashed against the same wall. No confirmation, no denial. And so the first true signal of 3I Atlas was silence itself. Night after night, the sky watchers still turned their telescopes. Sometimes they caught a faint streak drifting past Mars, but none could say if it was a body or merely the ghost of data. This silence was no longer the absence of measurement. It had become a medium, a long inhale from the universe, inviting humanity to ask itself whether it was ready to understand what might lie beyond knowing. The other instruments, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, ESA's satellites, every watchful eye, continued recording, quietly, but the results never left their channels. Those who saw the raw readings understood. If released, they could alter how the world perceived 3I Atlas, so the silence spread, not from emptiness, but from gravity, the weight of something too immense, too alien, to be spoken simply. In deep space, silence is natural, but on Earth, it becomes a message, a low tone, a rest in the cosmic score, urging us to listen again, to the strangeness, the wonder, and the quiet defiance of a distant object, moving beyond every prediction ever made. With NASA still silent, the scientists began turning their questions inward. Meetings were held behind closed lab doors, but no conclusions ever reached the public. Only spreadsheets, orbital models, and faint infrared readings from Perseverance circulated among specialists, a conversation spoken entirely in numbers. The silence stretched on. Days turned to weeks. Outside, the internet grew loud. Every photo, every pixel, every flicker of light became evidence for something. But inside the institutions, everyone knew the key data remained sealed away. Amateur astronomers enlarged every detail, cross-checked coordinates, measured fluctuations in brightness. Some claimed to see a strange regularity. Others dismissed it as noise. Neither side could prove the other wrong. Slowly, the scientific world divided in two. One camp stayed cautious, insisting this was a natural phenomenon, a quirk of reflection or instrument sensitivity. But as the coincidences piled up, the repeating frequency, the overlap with the old wow signal, even the skeptics felt an unease, as though reality itself had started to hesitate. The others, the independents, began whispering that 3i Atlas might not be random at all. Perhaps it was deliberate. Perhaps it was made. The longer the silence lasted, the louder curiosity became. Gaps in data turned into fertile ground for imagination. Ordinary technical papers were read like prophecies. Hypotheses hardened into rumors. The line between physics and perception blurred. Outside the labs, the restlessness grew. Tiny observatories, scattered enthusiasts, and night watchers glued to their screens. All felt something was being withheld. A leaked line of code here, a blurry image there, each fragment treated as revelation. But none could form a complete truth. Inside the agencies, researchers kept watching. They saw the light pulses, the recurring 143 Hz rhythm, the alignment with Sagittarius and that 1977 echo, anomalies that defied tidy equations. They also knew that releasing such data would ignite questions no one could yet answer. So silence became their language. No statements, no images, only withheld streams of numbers and the quiet act of observation itself. The gap between information and understanding became a mirror, reflecting humanity's own limits back at itself. Each night, telescopes returned to the same patch of sky. Observers still caught brief flickers, too faint to measure, but always in rhythm, as if 3i Atlas continued to breathe somewhere out there. That rhythm settled into science like a bass note under thought. And within that hum, researchers began to sense that not every anomaly demands an answer. Some exist simply to be witnessed, to remind us that knowledge moves at its own pace and that understanding often begins in silence. The data logs remain sealed, the coordinates and reflections archived deep within NASA's servers. But outside, in the absence of proof, perception itself became the new telescope. For when science falls quiet, it is human consciousness that steps forward, not to explain, but to listen. And from then on, every act of observation felt different. They were no longer just looking for an object, but searching the boundaries of awareness itself, where 3i Atlas still hovers, a silent question suspended in space, waiting to be answered not by discovery, but by realization. The prolonged silence of NASA did more than leave a gap in the data. It left a gap in the human mind, and that emptiness was swiftly filled with speculation, debate, and imagination. Global media began circling the story of 3i Atlas. Some outlets spoke cautiously, others shouted for clicks. Mysterious cylindrical object detected near Mars, NASA silent. Or, are we being watched from beyond the solar system? Within the scientific community, a few voices urged restraint. Too little data, they said. Too early to claim. But caution only fed curiosity. Every fragment of information became a battlefield. Articles, videos, podcasts, thousands of analyses looping across the digital globe. In Europe, science channels called it an unusually stable comet. In America, astronomy podcasts whispered about engineered design. In Japan and Russia, online forums dissected blurred images, comparing orbital tracks, spectral lines, anything that might fit the pattern. Each country built its own version of the story, but every version hit the same invisible wall. NASA and ESA remained silent, and that silence became a signal of its own. Scientists, journalists, and skywatchers alike could feel something wordless underneath it, a sense that control had slipped somewhere beyond reach, an object we could observe that might also be observing us. Across the internet, hashtags number 3 IATLAS and number Mars cylinder pulsed like twin beacons. People debated Bertie Dvorsky's rhythmic frequencies, argued about reflection angles, imagined technologies older than Earth itself. Conspiracy and science began to share the same breath. Yet beneath all the noise, the pattern was unmistakable. Humanity was trying to fill the silence NASA had left behind. Professional astronomers worked quietly, logging light curves, noting oscillations, measuring polarized reflections. But their reports never surfaced. They remained locked inside institutional servers. Data without a voice. It became clear that silence itself was a phenomenon, not the absence of knowledge, but a presence with weight and consequence. It pushed people inward, to question, to reason, to imagine. Each post, each comment, each video formed a kind of social echo, a second signal running parallel to the one coming from the stars. And like all signals, it hinted at discovery. The scattered observers of 3I Atlas began aligning their data, cross-referencing infrared readings, old 1,977 coordinates, and the strange coherence in Bertie's words. In the vacuum left by official silence, humanity learned a new way to observe, not through massive telescopes, but through intuition, pattern, and shared consciousness. This diffusion of curiosity carried no clear image, yet it moved with force. Every analysis, every late-night discussion, inched civilization closer to the question that still pulsed behind the static. What is that object? And are we the ones being watched? NASA's quiet, merged with global fascination, became a rhythm. Low, steady, haunting, a heartbeat between data points, a silence that people began to listen to, as if it were music. And across continents, from observatories to living rooms, one realization spread. Silence is never empty. It has mass, it has gravity, and when it lasts long enough, it pulls the whole world into its orbit. The silence stretched on, not just a gap in information, but a quiet force reshaping how humanity thought, how it observed, and what it chose to believe. Amateur astronomers began to change the way they recorded the sky. They slowed their gaze. They lingered on the smallest flickers, minute light shifts that once would have been dismissed as noise. Every signal, every pixel became precious. Professional scientists, meanwhile, felt the pressure mounting. They knew the world was watching. Each tweet dissected, each line of code scrutinized, and they knew that a single hasty statement could fracture the truth beyond repair. So they chose silence. And in doing so, they created something far louder than any press release. The observing community began to think differently. It wasn't just physics anymore. It was philosophy. They asked what it means for a distant object to respond to human attention. Some called it material cognition, others cosmic feedback, but all could feel the delicate rhythm pulsing through the quiet. Even the global media changed tone. Outlets once allergic to nuance now wrote gently about the mysterious cylinder, about wonder rather than alarm. They left space for imagination without trampling the fragile data that still existed. Inside NASA, the meetings continued. Not rushed, not loud. They became meditations in scientific humility. Each model, each line of analysis was handled as though it might be speaking back. For everyone involved knew this interstellar visitor wasn't just another data set, it was a mirror for how humans face what they do not yet understand. Elsewhere, amateurs kept reporting faint confirmations, light rhythms aligning with Bertie Djorsky's 0.143 Hz, and with the coordinates of the 1977. Wow. Signal, coincidences, maybe, or hints of a deeper order, threading through space like a soft, consistent breath. Independent researchers, caught between awe and skepticism, found themselves changed by the silence. It didn't destroy inquiry, it refined it. It made them slower, more patient, more sensitive to the smallest deviations in light. In the absence of sound, they learned to listen to the shape of quiet itself. When the universe goes silent, humans learn to listen differently. The waiting becomes data. The pause becomes part of the equation. Each unspoken interval is its own kind of measurement. And within that atmosphere, 3I Atlas stopped being an object. It became a lesson about observation, about awareness, about the fragile threshold between knowing and mystery. Silence, held long enough, ceases to be absence. It becomes a phenomenon, a form of interaction so subtle that even science must admit it is listening back. NASA's silence did not stop the world from looking up. Across continents, observatories turned their telescopes toward Mars's dim horizon, straining to capture the faintest tremor of light from 3I Atlas. In Chile, infrared instruments picked up a pulsing glow, barely visible yet rhythmic. In Japan, a radio array swept for weak emissions, finding only the soft hiss of the cosmic background. In Europe, optical telescopes recorded fleeting streaks across the sky, too transient to confirm, too precise to dismiss. Each nation measured differently, each team interpreted differently, yet all arrived at the same quiet realization. Something interstellar was moving through a space, once thought to be empty. The independent analyses, careful and cautious, began to overlap. Light oscillations, stable trajectory, no dust, no tail. Placed side by side, the data formed a pattern, a shape that implied coherence, but not yet understanding. Scientists began whispering across encrypted emails, specialist forums, occasional late-night calls. No official reports, no press releases, just fragments passed hand to hand, like photons bouncing between mirrors. A silent network of minds, sharing something the world was not ready to hear. Meanwhile, public curiosity found its own rhythm. News articles, videos, discussion threads, a global echo chamber of fascination. People talked about the cylinder, about the unnerving steadiness of its orbit, about the possibility that light itself was responding. The trickle of shared data, imperfect, fragmented, was enough to sustain wonder. Each paper, each post, each diagram became another reflected beam in a planetary conversation between science and speculation. Observers from different countries noticed the same strange symmetry, a flicker here, a faint trace there. Each hint seemed to converge on the same uneasy truth. 3I Atlas did not behave like anything natural. No one could say whether it was engineered or simply an improbable comet. But the absence of certainty, combined with this quiet chorus of analysis, became its own kind of revelation. People across the world began to think and to pause on what it means for something alien to drift so near, so deliberately silent. Within that global stillness, a new awareness surfaced. Not every truth needs confirmation. Sometimes silence itself is the signal, not a message of words or numbers, but of collective breath, the synchronized hesitation of a species facing the unknown. In the weeks that followed, new readings were logged, parsed, and quietly stored away. Nothing public, nothing denied. The silence became a framework, an unspoken agreement among scientists to listen before speaking. And out there, far beyond debate, 3i Atlas continued its steady drift, carrying its secret between light and perception, teaching humanity, in the most patient way possible, how to hear what cannot be said. NASA's silence endured. No statements, no images, no explanations. Yet the void it left was no longer empty. It became a signal, a low, steady pulse, inviting humanity to turn its gaze inward. Amateur astronomers kept their quiet vigil. They observed, compared, and noted in silence. Each faint shimmer, each pulse of light, became part of an unspeaking narrative. 3i Atlas drifted on its path, a shard of mystery, both present and elusive. The silence worked in two directions. To the public, it felt like absence, but absence became fascination. To scientists, it became a mirror, forcing them to ask whether they were the ones being observed by something they did not yet understand. The lack of data and the global response wove into a single rhythm. Articles, debates, commentaries, and analyses merged into a shared frequency, a kind of social resonance, a silent heartbeat of collective curiosity. Meanwhile, the names Birdie, Jorsky, and Moneypenny persisted. Their ideas, material cognition, the notion that a cosmic object could respond to human attention and light itself, lingered on the edge of science and myth. No proof, only a possibility, but enough to keep the scientific mind awake at night. Quantum physicists noticed parallels, the observer effect, the way measurement itself changes a system. Perhaps, they mused, 3i Atlas was not just being seen, perhaps it was participating, not an object, but an experiment in perception. The silence, stretching from NASA to every observatory on Earth, became its own condition, a laboratory of stillness. People stared into the gap, and the gap began to teach them how to listen. The withheld data were not mere numbers. They were rhythms, subtle inflections in the universe's voice. And as humans continued to study and debate, they began almost unconsciously to learn a fragment of that language. Night after night, telescopes turned again toward the region of its passing. The faint pulses persisted, soft, regular, almost breathing. No one could define them, yet everyone could feel them. The awareness of the unknown became a necessary part of science itself. Not every phenomenon demanded explanation. Sometimes, silence was the data. Sometimes, emptiness was information. And through it all, 3i Atlas remained. No strong signal, no sharp image, only its patient rhythm. As if whispering for humanity to slow down, to look more deeply, and to ask, with humility rather than certainty, can we truly comprehend what exists without light, without language, only through silence and the awareness that listens within it? 3i Atlas appeared with a startling mass. To the naked eye, it was only a pale line against the darkness, but the orbital data told a different story. Its estimated mass was that of a large asteroid, and yet it moved with impossible precision, its trajectory untouched by the gravitational pull of Mars or the neighboring planets. This alone made astronomers pause. By every known law of celestial mechanics, a massive body should drift, its path nudged ever so slightly by the gravity wells it passes. But 3I Atlas did not drift. It sailed through space, as though following a plan or remembering one. Theories bloomed and fell apart in quick succession. Some proposed coincidence, a delicate balance of forces, purely mathematical. Others invoked hidden propulsion, a slow release of gas or photon pressure. But infrared readings showed nothing escaping its surface. No jets, no heat, only reflection. For a brief moment, science stood at the edge of something new, a phenomenon that ignored the old equations, a mass obeying a law, not yet written in human terms. It moved not as matter, but as intent. Physicists called it impossible motion, a term that felt more poetic than technical, but fit the data all the same. Something so large, so stable, that its perfection itself became suspicious, as if nature had been out-engineered. The silence around that realization was louder than any discovery announcement. 3I Atlas was alone out there, but its stillness carried gravity of its own, not physical, but psychological. It drifted onward, indifferent to questions, its mass immense, its presence quiet. And in that quiet, humanity began to wonder, was this an accident of physics, or a message, written not in light or language, but in the perfection of its orbit, waiting for someone patient enough to notice? 3I Atlas possessed one feature that seized every gaze the moment it was noticed. Its luminous tail did not behave like any comet's, not bending away at random under the sun's pressure, not curling under gravity's pull, but instead holding perfectly straight, always pointing toward the Sunday. By classical astrophysics, that should be impossible. A comet's tail forms as solar radiation pushes gas and dust away, producing arcs, spirals, sometimes chaotic fans of particles. No tail ever aligns in perfect opposition to the solar wind. But 3I Atlas did. Its beam of light was unwavering, its reflection constant, as though it knew exactly where it was meant to face. Infrared scans deepened the mystery. No outgassing, no trace of dust or vapor. The tail wasn't being emitted at all. It was being expressed, a reflection perhaps, or something more deliberate, a property of its surface rather than its core. Some suggested that the tail was the result of exotic materials, a kind of self-correcting photonic reflection, yet even that failed to explain its symmetry. How could a massive body maintain both a straight, sunward axis and an unperturbed orbit? Such balance looked less like coincidence and more like calibration. Astronomers watching the spectral data realized they were not just witnessing physics, but something resembling behavior. The consistency of light, its insistence on a single direction, felt almost communicative, as if the object were showing them the line it wanted them to see. The tail's faint beam became a question. Could light itself carry intent? Could an object interact with its environment through direction and reflection rather than energy or radio signal? In the long pause between transmissions, those tracking 3I Atlas began to understand that each measurement was also meditation. They were no longer just charting trajectories. They were listening. The line of light across the dark was more than data. It was a quiet rhythm of thought, a dialogue between human awareness and a traveler that spoke only in the language of light and stillness. Infrared spectroscopy revealed an anomaly that rippled through every observatory that dared to study it. 3I Atlas showed clear spectral lines of nickel, but none of iron. In astrophysics, such a ratio is unthinkable. Nickel and iron are cosmic twins, born together in the nuclear furnaces of collapsing stars, forged side by side in the same atomic fire. To find one without the other is like finding the echo of a song without its voice. The data were checked again and again. The readings held nickel uniformly distributed across the surface, forming what appeared to be a smooth, reflective coating, not clustered in veins, not mixed with silicates, but spread as if applied, and no trace of iron dust, no metallic residue, no sign of oxidation. Scientists hesitated to call it artificial, but they named it industrial anomaly, a cautious phrase that meant it shouldn't exist unless someone made it. Not proof of design, but a fingerprint of intent. The absence of iron puzzled even the most pragmatic observers. It violated stellar chemistry itself. If 3I Atlas was natural, it must have been formed under conditions unknown to any star or nebula we have ever mapped. If it wasn't, then it was evidence of matter engineered for endurance, built to ignore decay, to survive eons of radiation and dust, without corroding, without rusting into nothingness. The amateur community embraced the mystery. Forums filled with quiet awe. Some called the missing iron, the silence in the metal, a deliberate omission, as if the object had edited itself to endure the scrutiny of light. Others whispered of material cognition, the idea that matter itself might choose how it reflects, what it reveals. Meanwhile, professional astronomers kept their notebooks sealed. Each line of data, each spectrum, opened another abyss of questions. Where did it come from? Why such composition? How could it glide so perfectly and hold a tail that pointed unerringly toward the sun? Night after night, telescopes turned again to its path. The same faint pulse repeated, a shimmer like breathing through glass. The missing iron became more than an absence. It became a message in negative space, a way of saying this is not how nature works. And yet, here it is. Whether 3I Atlas was an object, a mechanism, or a language in physical form, no one could tell. But the thought grew slowly, quietly, among those who watched longest. Perhaps what we were studying was not a thing, but a way of being seen, matter tuned to respond to attention, a conversation written in nickel light. Spectral observations of 3I Atlas revealed a peculiar phenomenon. The light reflected from the object was not evenly distributed. It displayed anomalous polarization, unlike any comet or asteroid ever recorded. In astronomy, reflected light from solid matter or cometary surfaces typically polarizes in predictable ways, depending on the angle of incidence, surface structure, and surrounding dust particles. 3I Atlas defied these expectations. Its rays of light tended to polarize along a stable orientation, even as the object rotated and traveled around the sundial. Physicists were puzzled. A fixed polarization, while the object had no fixed spin axis, is extraordinarily rare. It suggested a surface of remarkable uniformity, or perhaps the capacity to interact with light in a subtle, active way. These observations were more than mere data. They hinted that the object was not just inert matter. It might possess the ability to produce active optical responses, a form of light-based interaction that humanity had never seen. Amateur researchers shared optical models. They simulated polarized beams, repeating along a fixed orientation, and realized such behavior is nearly impossible in nature. Each observation consistently reproduced the polarization pattern, as if the object remembered the direction of incoming light. This anomaly complemented previous observations. The stable orbit, the sun-pointing tail, and the nickel-rich, iron-deficient composition. Together, these traits formed a chain of phenomena that current science could not explain. Infrared observations confirmed that the unusual polarization did not originate from dust or plasma. This strengthened the hypothesis. 3I Atlas might have a specially structured surface or a mechanism finely tuned to control how light reflects. In the silent sky, the polarized light pulsed like a subtle rhythm. No one could say what the object was doing, but everyone sensed something delicate, a soft signal hidden within the light, inviting humans to contemplate matter that could interact in ways that science had yet to name. Anomalous polarization is one of the factors that makes 3I Atlas entirely unlike any natural object ever encountered. It is not merely a physical trait, but a sign of consciousness embedded in matter, a quiet beat, bridging light, material, and human perception. 3I Atlas moves along an almost perfect orbit, aligned with the ecliptic plane. This is unusual, as interstellar objects rarely conform to such order. According to astrophysics, natural objects follow inclined orbits, shaped by the gravitational influence of planets and stars. But 3I Atlas seems to glide along a fixed path, without wobble, without deviation, despite the surrounding gravitational forces. This phenomenon gave astronomers pause. An orbit coinciding with the ecliptic makes continuous observation from Earth possible. It is nearly flawless, as if the object were designed never to slip out of view. Computer simulations suggest that if it were merely a comet, such orbital stability would be nearly impossible. Even the slightest gravitational perturbation would alter its path. Yet 3I Atlas continues smoothly, as if following a subtle choice, a law we have yet to understand. This aligns with other anomalies: a massive body with virtually zero orbital deviation, a sun-pointing tail, and unusual light polarization. Each factor reinforces the hypothesis that this object does not entirely obey the natural laws we know. Amateur astronomers shared orbital models. They compared it with other comets and previous interstellar meteoroids. No object achieves stability like 3I Atlas. Everything appears as if intentionally arranged, a rhythm drifting through space, keeping it within humanity's gaze. Observing this orbit is not merely physics. It is a meditation on order and intent in the cosmos. A silent object drifts, unchanging, yet tells a story through its path and light. Scientists began to ask themselves, could an interstellar object be designed to maintain such an orbit? Not merely to traverse space, but to be discovered on its own terms? Silence continues to envelop the observations. Yet the orbital alignment serves as a subtle proof, teaching humans to observe the cosmos, not only with eyes and instruments, but with imagination and patience. And in that silence, 3I Atlas drifts on, keeping its own cadence, reminding the keen observer that sometimes the universe speaks through order itself, without sound, without data. 3I Atlas does not merely move along the ecliptic plane. It approaches three planets, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter, with astonishing precision. The timing of its near passages around each planet falls neatly within the margins predicted by orbital models, yet the coincidence exceeds the limits of randomness. Every comet or asteroid ever recorded has shown far greater deviations, But 3i Atlas seems to choose the exact moments to pass near all three worlds. Astronomers analyzed the orbital data. They found the object moved steadily, its trajectory unwavering by even 1/1000th of a degree. This made every classical celestial simulation fail to fully explain its behavior. Some experts suggested that gravitational interactions among the planets might have created these alignments, but the object's stability and timing almost rule that out. It appears to select its own timing, a subtle rhythm that humans can perceive only through mathematics. The phenomenon evokes something beyond physics, a rhythm of cosmic order, a silent traveler crossing three planets whose motion seems to speak to whoever happens to be watching. Independent researchers began linking this orbital data with the strange light oscillations, the fixed polarization, and the nickel-rich composition. Each anomaly alone was extraordinary. Together with its orbital precision and planetary encounters, they formed a sequence that classical physics deems impossible. Discussions erupted across scientific forums. Was this the mark of a natural body or a deliberately placed structure? No one dared to conclude, yet the sense of deliberate intent was difficult to dismiss. As 3i Atlas passed each planet, no visible events occurred, no flares, no gravitational disturbances, yet every alignment and timing felt like a deep note in the music of the cosmos. Those who watched closely could feel the steady rhythm, as if the light itself were telling a story that data had not yet learned to describe. And amid all the calculations, a new awareness emerged. Some interstellar objects may not drift aimlessly, but move with a rhythm, interacting with planets, with light, and with human perception itself. In that silence, there were no voices, no direct proofs, only the lingering sense that this object operates in a way our science cannot yet explain. A rhythm, an order, a story still unfolding, written in light and distance. One of the strangest things about 3i Atlas is its estimated point of origin. According to orbital models, the object appears to come from the same region where the WOW signal was detected in 1977 from the constellation Sagittarius. The WOW signal, an unusual radio transmission, appeared only once, at the precise hydrogen line frequency of 1,420 megahertz, then vanished without explanation. For decades, astronomers searched, but never found a verified source. Now, data from 3i Atlas shows that the object emerged from nearly that same region of space. The coincidence cannot be explained by chance. Those who examined the data closely noticed that its point of origin, trajectory, and light oscillations form a subtle pattern connecting the present to the past. This raises profound questions. Is 3i Atlas a natural object, or does it carry information placed in space to be discovered after decades? If it were a normal comet or asteroid, such a coincidence would be almost impossible. But if it is something more deliberate, it seems to know the exact time and position when humans would be able to observe it. Amateur astronomers shared models, calculating the likelihood of alignment with the WOW signal. Each calculation pointed to the same conclusion. The probability of coincidence is nearly zero. The correlation proves nothing, yet it implies something. For an open question: is the universe sending a message, or are we merely repeating the question it asked 48 years ago? This moment of observation brought no noise, no vivid image, only faint data, subtle light fluctuations, and a silence that made people pause. The sense that this object might carry an intentional design is not necessarily scientific theory, but a quiet awareness of order within the universe. 3I Atlas has become a symbol of impossibility, a massive body with a tail always facing the sun, containing nickel but no iron, exhibiting anomalous light polarization, moving along the ecliptic plane, passing 3 planets with perfect timing, and now emerging near the wow signal of 1977. Each element on its own is strange enough, but combined, they form a chain of phenomena that humanity has yet to explain, an object that is not just matter, but a story, a signal, a low resonant note in the universe, inviting reflection on order, intent, and awareness. In the silence between data and speculation, 3I Atlas drifts quietly, keeping its own secret between light and human perception. And there, between numbers and stillness, an understanding begins to form. Not every phenomenon needs an immediate answer. Some things exist, simply to be observed, to be seen and contemplated, so that each of us may glimpse the delicate order of the cosmos. October 29th, 2025. 3I Atlas approaches the Sunday. It is not the first time it has crossed the realm of stars, but this moment is special. It's perihelion, the closest point to the sun in its orbit. Telescopes on Earth and instruments orbiting Mars track its every movement, yet the most important data remains silent. NASA keeps the infrared readings classified, ESA records, but releases nothing. The silence itself feels deliberate, as if the object is preparing to reveal something, a confession without words. Observations show that 3I Atlas remains stable. Its luminous tail still faces the sun, its reflective surface unchanged. No orbital deviation, no sign of outgassing. Such data makes astronomers uneasy. Normally, an object passing this close to the sun would alter its orbit or shed part of its mass. But 3I Atlas does neither. Bertie Jorsky and amateur observers notice a subtle fluctuation in its light. Its cycle is not random. It has rhythm, as if the object is transmitting something to those who are watching. A confession, wordless yet intentional. Physicists running simulations outline 2 possibilities. First, that 3I Atlas is a natural comet, its enormous icy core glowing before disintegration under solar radiation. But this does not align with its stable orbit or rhythmic light. Second, that 3I Atlas is an artificial structure, or at least a self-regulating body, using solar energy to alter its surface or emit delicate optical signals. This theory explains its uncanny stability, its nickel-rich composition, and its unusual polarization. Amateur astronomers quickly share their findings: orbital models, light curve graphs, blurred images. Together they form a strange mosaic, an object that seems both natural and deliberate, a phenomenon that feels like a message, still beyond human understanding. In the surrounding quiet, those watching feel something almost imperceptible, not sound, not brilliance, but a rhythm, a faint admission, a whisper through light, to every eye turned skyward. 3I Atlas passes its perihelion, keeping its secret perfectly intact. Yet each flicker of light, each precise position along its path, seems to tell a story. One that, if read carefully, might reveal that the object is indeed saying something, not with words, but with order, with light, and with the mystery of its own existence. Perihelion is the decisive moment. 3I Atlas enters the region closest to the Sun, where all physical effects are at their strongest. Astronomers must consider two primary scenarios. The first scenario, 3I Atlas, is a natural comet. In this case, it would react to solar energy, sublimate its outer ice layer, form a bright tail, and possibly slightly alter its orbit. But observational data shows otherwise. Its orbit remains nearly unchanged. Its light fluctuations are consistent. Its tail points directly toward the Sun, and its surface reflects steadily. Classical physics models cannot fully explain this phenomenon. The second scenario, 3I Atlas is an artificial structure, or at least a finely tuned object, designed to respond to sunlight and solar energy. Here, perihelion is not merely a close pass by the Sun, but a trigger for its internal mechanism, allowing it to adjust its surface, light fluctuations, or emit signals. This scenario accounts for all observed anomalies: nickel without iron, unusual light polarization, orbit aligned with the ecliptic plane, and precise timing of planetary approaches. Scientists analyze both scenarios cautiously. They know that any early disclosure would ignite controversy over every theory. Thus, all data is stored internally, and each measurement and model is shared only within select research groups. Within the amateur observation community, these models become topics of discussion. People weigh the probabilities of each scenario, compare them to known anomalies, and wonder, is this object purely natural, or is there a subtle intention hidden within it? The silence from NASA and ESA creates a psychological effect. Amateur astronomers and science journalists perceive a rhythm. Between the data and speculation, they listen to the quiet as a signal, not with sound, but with awareness. In internal meetings, scientists discuss carefully. They simulate both cometary and artificial scenarios, calculate the orbit, light fluctuations, and tail behavior. Every detail is considered, but nothing is released publicly. Silence becomes a tool, protecting the information, while allowing the global community to observe in a subtle way. Perihelion passes. 3I Atlas continues along its orbit, a silent object challenging perception. The scenarios have been modeled, but the truth remains in the space, between data and reflection, between matter and awareness. The quiet of perihelion becomes a subtle lesson. Not every phenomenon needs immediate explanation. Sometimes, the silence and order of the object are themselves a signal, inviting humans to learn how to observe and reflect. After 3I Atlas passed perihelion, its orbit showed no significant change. Yet the light fluctuations, the polarization levels, and the direction of its bright tail continued to be recorded. The object drifted silently, like a faint heartbeat, across the sky. Amateur astronomers and international observation groups kept tracking it, noting every light fluctuation. With smaller instruments, optical and infrared telescopes, each observation was a subtle test, like measuring the pulse of an object humans cannot touch. Post-perihelion data did not produce any notable events. No eruptions, no dust plumes, only faint oscillations, small points of light, still following the old rhythm. Observers realized the object not only drifted quietly, but maintained order, keeping pace with the surrounding galaxy. Physicists noted how rare this was. Large mass, stable orbit, consistent light polarization, and regular fluctuations did not match any known comet or interstellar asteroid. This reinforced the sense that 3I Atlas could be a unique object, though whether natural or artificial remained undetermined. NASA and ESA remained silent. They stored the data, not releasing even minor observations. But this very silence made the independent observing community more attentive, noticing the faintest details and reflecting on the rhythm the object created. Scientists recognized a subtle lesson. Silence is also data. The gaps between measurements, the weighting, the meticulous observation, all carry information as if the object is telling a story through light and order. In the following weeks, every observation repeated the same pattern. The light fluctuations, polarization, and tail direction remained constant, unchanged, deliberate. 3I Atlas continued to drift to its own rhythm. Observers felt that this object was not merely existing. It interacted, not with words, not with strong signals, but through stability, light, and order, as if inviting humans to recognize laws that no one has yet named. The silence after perihelion became a space for reflection. The scientific community and amateur observers alike gradually realized that sometimes the unexplained offers the greatest lessons. The object drifted silently, and humans, with attention and patience, learned to listen to the universe through light, through rhythm, and through their own awareness. Perihelion has passed. 3I Atlas continues to drift silently along its orbit, its bright tail pointing toward the sun, its light fluctuations steady, its mass and trajectory unusual. Scientists examine the data, yet no answers emerge. The silence of NASA and ESA creates a gap both vast and deep, a gap that human imagination and awareness fill with reflection. The moment of perihelion teaches that not every phenomenon demands an immediate explanation. Sometimes, an object quietly exists with its own rhythm, and the surrounding silence is the most important part of the information. The light fluctuations, polarization, tail direction, and stable orbit are subtle clues, not through radio waves, not through sound, but through light and order, through the rhythm 3I Atlas maintains. Throughout its approach to perihelion, amateur observations and scientific simulations create a hazy but meaningful picture. This interstellar object is not merely a mass of matter, it is a form of information, a low hum in the universe, inviting humans to observe, reflect, and comprehend. Amateur astronomers, professional scientists, and online followers alike recognize a subtle lesson. Silence and rhythm carry value equal to data. The unexplained is the most stimulating part of thought. In the quiet of perihelion, 3I Atlas drifts on, keeping its secrets. Yet every flash of light, every fluctuation, leaves traces, teaching humans how to listen to the universe through their own awareness. And in that final silence, a realization emerges. It is not the object that speaks, but the universe allowing humans to perceive through light, through order, and through the delicate heartbeat of space. After the faint data and the long silence, social networks became the only place where humanity searched for answers. Posts, videos, and comments spread rapidly. Hashtags number 3I Atlas, number Mars Cylinder, and number The Harbinger appeared on every platform, from Twitter and Reddit to Telegram and amateur science forums. People from across the world joined in. In India, Brazil, Russia, and Japan, they shared analyses, hypotheses, and personal simulations, blurry images, orbital data, light fluctuations. Everything was circulated, edited, and debated. The public discourse turned chaotic, yet it created its own rhythm. Every post, every video clip was like a photon scattering through the internet, forming an uncontrollable stream of information. Professional scientists tried to remain calm. They analyzed the data, discussed it in private conferences, but made no public statements. This silence only deepened curiosity. People began to ask, was 3I Atlas a natural body, or a deliberate, intricate construct? Amateur observers kept measuring and comparing. Some believed in the unusual meteor hypothesis. Others proposed that the object was a form of intelligence, responding to light, adjusting its orbit, and producing a rhythm humans could only feel. Within days, scientific journals and mainstream outlets started reporting on the cylindrical object near Mars. That has formers Locaster. No head not has formers Rummen. Some headlines were designed to ignite attention. NASA remains silent as object aligns with 3 planets. Are we being observed from beyond the solar system? The global reaction was not panic, but a quiet psychological tension. People felt the distance between knowledge and mystery, between data and awareness. Each question, each comment, each analysis became a deep tone, a symphony of curiosity and unease. Astronomers began to realize that social networks were no longer just arenas for debate. They had become a mental observatory, a vast cognitive system where millions of people responded simultaneously to the object. Theories, though unverified, still generated a rhythm of their own, one that 3I Atlas seemed to respond to. With its silence, its steady orbit, its unwavering order, and within the stillness of data and the pulse of the digital world, a realization took shape. Humanity was no longer simply observing the object. They had become part of its rhythm. Their reactions, speculations, and questions forming invisible feedback, a reflection of how deeply the universe can make us listen. While global debate intensified, the official scientific community remained silent. NASA continued to withhold detailed data on 3I Atlas, and ESA merely confirmed that all instruments were functioning normally. No new images, no official reports. Behind closed doors, scientists met in private sessions, sharing numbers, orbital paths, light fluctuations, and polarization data. Every analysis was stored internally, never released to the public. The silence was not due to a lack of data, but a deliberate act to protect information and avoid misinterpretation. Yet the rhythm of global media did not slow. Scientific journals, news networks, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with theories about the cylinder, the stable orbit, the unusual polarization, and the possibility that the object carried information. Within the scientific community, a realization began to take shape. Official silence can sometimes create a greater impact than any statement. It made the public and amateur astronomers more focused, more careful, more contemplative. Some international research teams attempted to build unified models, combining data from large observatories, amateur measurements, light fluctuations, and the suspected origin near the 1977 WOW signal. Placed together, the data formed a hazy but consistent picture. Quantum physicists noted that the object, though composed of matter, might interact with light in a way never before observed. Its rhythmic brightness and precise orbital order felt like a subtle form of feedback. one that every observation helped to decode. The silence raised a larger question. Can humanity ever fully understand a phenomenon when the most crucial data remains hidden? There was no clear answer, but most scientists agreed that this absence itself was intellectually valuable, forcing deeper observation, more thoughtful analysis, and a kind of imaginative reasoning beyond pure physics. In the weeks that followed, international collaboration unfolded quietly. Teams compared data from Europe, South America, Japan, and the US, cross-referencing models and refining assumptions. Still, no final conclusions were announced. The silence persisted, both challenge and catalyst for those who sought to understand 3I Atlas. And in that long quiet, the amateur community and the scientific establishment began to see a shared truth. Not every object demands immediate explanation. Official silence, too, is a form of data, a pause, a low resonance in the universe, guiding human perception to expand, to listen, and to sense the object through its light, its order, and the quiet conversation it holds with space itself. NASA's prolonged silence was not merely a gap in information. It became a psychological void, a quiet rhythm in the minds of millions, where curiosity, doubt, and fear began to merge. On social media, every rumor, every hypothesis spread rapidly. The cylinder 3I Atlas, its light fluctuations, unusual polarization, and orbit aligned with the ecliptic, became constant topics of debate and analysis. Amateur astronomers spent hours comparing images, calculating orbits, simulating light patterns. Gradually, they realized one thing: NASA's silence created an effect more powerful than any announcement. It sharpened focus, heightened attention, and encouraged observation like never before. On the international stage, media outlets sensed the psychological tension. Cautious articles interlaced with speculation, podcasts analyzing the phenomenon, produced an information rhythm parallel to the extraterrestrial object itself. Within the scientific community, astronomers and physicists became more cautious. They knew that even the smallest data point, every light fluctuation, carried weight. But publishing it could provoke countless unanswered questions. Thus, silence became an observational strategy, protecting data while creating reflection within the community. Human psychology responded in unexpected ways. The information gap generated mild anxiety, yet simultaneously encouraged more careful observation and analysis. People gradually learned to read the silence, understanding that the object did not speak, yet its order and light told a story of their own. The societal impact spread widely. Amateur astronomers, independent observation groups, and science media collaborated spontaneously. A slow, smoldering rhythm rippled across the world, creating a form of collective awareness where humans together listened, observed, and imagined. This moment offered a subtle lesson. Not every phenomenon requires immediate explanation. Silence, light fluctuations, and orbital order are all part of the data to be observed, experienced, and interpreted by humans themselves. Amid the quiet sky, 3I Atlas continued its drift, like a slow pulse in the universe, and through observation and analysis, humankind learned to listen to what remained unspoken, to what remained unexplained, and to what exists beyond comprehension. After weeks of observation, data from telescopes, satellites, and amateur observers began to converge, forming a comprehensive picture. There were no definitive answers, but every detail aligned. From the light fluctuations to the orbit, from the sun-directed tail to the origin near the 1977 WOW signal, the stream of data arranged itself like notes in a slow, deep musical score. It created a subtle rhythm, inviting humans to listen, not only with their eyes but with their awareness. Amid global unrest, official silence became a language. No words, no press releases, just a prolonged pause between data points. The world synchronized in observation, each person asking questions, seeking answers, forming a kind of collective knowledge. Scientists realized not every phenomenon requires immediate explanation. Silence, gaps in information, and the drift of the object are all part of the data. Observation and reflection become a form of mental measurement, allowing humans to engage with the universe more profoundly. Public discourse, though sometimes swept by rumors and speculation, maintained its own quiet rhythm. Every post, every analysis, every discussion was part of a shared cadence, connecting people worldwide to the interstellar object. Looking back at the whole event, 3I Atlas was more than a physical body. It embodied subtle order, a silent rhythm, teaching humans how to observe, how to listen, and how to contemplate the unknown. In this profound quiet, each observation became a dim light, each reflection a breath, and the object, drifting along its orbit, kept its secrets intact. The lesson of Part 7 concludes. Global unrest was not merely a social reaction, it was a test of perception, a demonstration that, when faced with the unknown, humans must learn to hear the silence and understand that silence can sometimes be the universe's strongest message. By December 2025, 3I Atlas re-emerged from the far side of its orbit. The major telescopes on Earth, from the Vera Rubin Observatory to optical and spectroscopic stations in Chile and Japan, were poised to record every light fluctuation, every reflection, every subtle motion. The atmosphere among astronomers was tense, yet silent. Every measurement, every preparation served a single purpose: to determine whether the object moved naturally or if its orbit and behavior reflected a deliberate intention. Researchers divided tasks carefully. One team focused on the orbit, calculating precise velocity and trajectory. Another recorded infrared spectra and light polarization. A third prepared radio frequency measurements, especially around 1,420 megahertzes, the frequency where the WOW signal had once appeared. Each observation was time synchronized. Signals were collected, fed into analytical computers, with software simulating both natural and artificial scenarios. The international scientific community knew that this was the most crucial moment in the history of observing 3I Atlas. If the orbit remained stable and unaltered, the object would likely be natural, but any deviation could reveal the possibility of intentional design. Amateur astronomers also observed diligently. They recorded every faint light, each fluctuation, each reflection, using modest yet precise instruments. All these data, however small, were incorporated into a global model, creating a collective picture. This preparation was not only about physical data, it was a mental readiness. Scientists understood that any result could challenge human perceptions of the universe, matter, and intention. Amid the quiet of the observatories, 3I Atlas drifted silently, like a subtle, measured breath. Light fluctuations, stable orbit, and prior anomalies were all waiting to be confirmed. In this decisive moment of December, the major telescopes began recording 3i Atlas with high resolution. Every pixel, every light fluctuation was carefully monitored. Astronomers analyzed infrared spectra, light polarization, and the direction of the bright tail. All efforts aimed to detect any anomaly. Compared to the expected orbit and behavior of typical celestial objects, the data revealed one clear fact: the orbit remained almost unchanged. The bright tail still pointed toward the sun. Light fluctuations remained faint, and even with a subtle, steady rhythm. These observations matched reports from before perihelion. However, the light fluctuations contained subtle differences. Some photons reflected in directions not entirely predicted. Researchers called these microvariations. Not enough to alter conclusions, but enough to suggest that the object retained fine, unexplained characteristics. Radio observation stations monitored the 1,420 MHz frequency, the same range where the WOW signal appeared in 1977. Some weak signal bursts appeared, unclear and unconfirmed, as either artificial or natural. Yet their presence prompted further reflection. Could the object be responding to its surrounding environment? Could it be maintaining a rhythm with observations from Earth? Research teams integrated the data, simulating both cometary and artificial object scenarios. The cometary model failed to fully explain the stable orbit and light fluctuations. The artificial object model accounted for order and rhythm, but no direct evidence confirmed it. This observation also revealed the psychological impact on scientists. They knew every small measurement, every faint streak of light, was being analyzed by a global community, yet they maintained silence. This silence both protected the data and allowed nuanced perception to develop. Amateur observations continued as well. Astronomy enthusiasts, with telescopes and simulation software, tracked light rhythm, fluctuations, and orbit. They realized that when observations were globally synchronized, even the smallest data points formed a shared rhythm, like a deep musical composition in which the object and humanity participated together. This moment illustrated a subtle lesson. Not every interstellar object requires immediate explanation. Small anomalies, quiet rhythms, and the silence of observing institutions together create a refined form of information, an information not recorded on paper, but residing in perception, in focus, and in the silent rhythm of observers across the globe. 3i Atlas continued to drift silently. Its subtle fluctuations, light rhythm, and stable orbit kept its secrets intact. Yet this new data opened the possibility for humanity to understand that the universe may communicate through rhythm and order, not through words or intense light, but through quietude and subtlety. 3i Atlas continued to drift along its orbit, like a deep, steady rhythm moving among the planets. Telescopes from Vera Rubin in Chile to amateur stations around the world